Hi, I'm Chad. I'm a financial planner here in Canada, and today I'm going to help answer a question of what a retirement would look like if you have $500,000 invested for it. We're going to jump into my software in a moment and explore a scenario with a couple that's about to turn 65. They're ready to retire and they just want to know what it will look like. Let's get started. So before we jump into any of the planning or anything like that, we need to get an idea of who it is that we're actually talking about here and how they're invested, where they are at financially, things like that. So let's jump into that. So we have Jim and Pam Halpert. They met actually when they were working. How adorable is that? It's a great story if you haven't seen it. And through their career, Jim has accumulated $250,000 into his RRSP, $100,000 into his TFSA. Both are invested moderately. I would consider a mix of about 40% fixed income and 60% equity, moderate investment. Both of my return expectations, 2.5% for fixed income and 5% for equity, are very conservative. I like to make sure that the ecosystem that I create here in the software is more harsh than reality. So even compared to what FP Canada suggests I should be using as returns, I lower those and I increase what I should be looking at for inflation, because I want to make this harsh so that when you come back to me 5 years later, you're actually ahead of the plan. That's kind of the way I approach it. So with a 60-40 mix, they have a 4% return on those two accounts. Pam has another $100,000 in RSPs and $50,000 in TFSAs invested identically. They also have a home that at this point they own free and clear. It's worth $1 million in Ontario, which is pretty nice. But ideally, they don't want to lean on the house as a financial asset. They want to leave that as long as possible. We can always explore the idea of maybe a downsize or something like that, but for the sake of this, we're just not going to touch it. And one thing you may notice is I actually set appreciation on primary residences in particular in all projections that I do at 0%. Even a mere 2% increase on real estate over a 30-year projection can turn $1 million property into a multiple $1 million property. Then all of a sudden the projection is showing you're leaving $8-9 million, and it's not really what we're talking about. And so if it's not going to be income generating, I'm not going to increase it in my projections. It's a decision I've made for my software and for my projections. So I definitely have clients disagree with it, and I'll change it in that scenario, but it is something that I've chosen to do for sure. So anyway, so they have that house, they have those assets. If I go over to what's called our planning page, which is kind of everything all in one place at one time, we can get a good idea of what it is that they're actually spending. So they're spending around $66,000 a year or $5,500 per month. And to be clear, that is after tax. That is money that they have in their hand and they are spending on eating out, going to movies with friends, whatever it is that they're doing. Now, at $66,000, that's in today's dollars. And what we do, because we have to factor inflation into that, we do. So that's increasing along the way. There's the real column, today's dollars, and the nominal column, tomorrow's dollars, in here. And the first thing that I'm looking for Jim and Pam here is years highlighted in red. And so this is what I would just call their baseline scenario. I have literally zero strategy put in here. This is what the average Canadian would do if they kind of got parachuted into this financial situation. And they're starting to run into some financial problems or a liquidity event, whatever it is that you want to call it, around their age 87 year. That's pretty far out there, which is great. And remember, they still have $1 million property that they can lean on at any time. So the likelihood of them running out of money, like truly running out of money, is probably pretty slim. But there are definitely ways that I can improve this situation. And I want to go through that and see exactly what we could be looking at. So after showing Jim and Pam that first scenario, we talked about spending a little bit, because the reality is the likelihood of someone spending from age 65 to age 90 that consistently is very, very low. There's a lot of academic research that suggests that it would be very, very unlikely. I've had a few clients recently bring up the idea that possibly baby boomers are the ones that will kind of buck that trend, because you're the first generation that really accumulated massive amounts of wealth in some cases, and travel was really, really important. So possibly you're the generation that kind of bucks that decrease. But historically, usually around 70, 75, real spending does start to decline.
And around 80, 85, it declines a little bit more. And we've all heard of this, right? We've all heard of the go, slow go, no-go stages. So we talked to Jim and Pam and we said, well, why don't we bring that into the equation? So here now, they're continuing to spend their $5,500 a month, or $66,000. Then for the year they turn 75, they drop that spending to $54,000 a year, or $12,000 reduction, or $1,000 a month. So they drop it to $4,500 a month. Then once they turn 85, they drop it to $4,000 a month. And again, just another reminder, that's today's dollars. I'm not suggesting that when they turn 85, they are spending $4,000 in future dollars, and it's today's dollars, which is $78,000 according to my projections here. And now when I look, I have no years highlighted in red. This is a win, right? Like already just by modifying their spending a little bit, we've got to a point where they won't run into a liquidity issue. That's a win. If I pull up their estate projection now in this scenario, if we look at combined, because that's really the important one, because in this scenario, they die together, I guess. They're leaving not only the real estate of $1 million, but they're leaving $366,000 of financial assets. That's some nice buffer. This is a great place to start. Now, what I like to do now is, this is when I go to work with my clients, right? We've done the initial assessment, then I go to work, then we come back together for the plan presentation. My objective is to increase that estate as much as I possibly can. Then I'm going to decrease it, and you'll understand what I mean in a second, but we'll get there in a minute. So the first change I made here, the only thing that has changed from the scenario you just saw with the slow go, no-go, is that I've delayed both of their CPPs to age 70. And if you don't know why you would want to do that, I have a video that I'll link right here in the video that you can go to, where I talk about why delaying CPP to 70 can be an excellent idea. And in the case of Jim and Pam here, I think it's a fantastic idea. There's a very active trade though, right? When you're delaying CPP, you are saying, I am going to lean more on my investments in my 60s so that I can have a more reliable income source in my 70s from CPP. That's a very active trade, right? If you don't have the assets for that, it's not a good idea. But in their case, they do. And once again, I look, no red years, fantastic. And our estate projection still has the million, but we've added nearly $200,000 to the estate without one change. I think that's really, really underrated. Lots of people don't like the idea of delaying CPP. If you've watched the channel long enough, you know I'm incredibly biased towards this. This is one of my favorite recommendations, and I make it almost every day at this point. Really, I love the idea of delaying CPP to 70. It isn't for everyone, but it's definitely one that I'd recommend for Jim and Pam. Let's take that government delay one step further. Let's take a look. In this projection here, I've taken the idea of a government benefit delay even further by delaying OAS to 70. And this is a recommendation I do struggle with, even when the math is sound, and which it is here, by the way. So now the projection is showing the estates leaving $580,000. It's about a $50,000 increase, and that's nothing to sneeze at. But let's remember, that's $50,000 of future dollars. That's not today's dollars. So if I go to a plan comparison, this is with a CPP set to 70 delay, and this has both delay. Let's kind of look at this for a second. We're going to start here in nominal dollars. Our goal progression went from 119, or it has 19% buffer, yes please, to 21% buffer. It's a 2% increase. That's great. And the estate, like I said, goes up by about 50,000. It's 49,000. But in real dollars, that's a $26,000 increase. Now, again, I am not here to sneeze at $26,000. That's a significant amount of money. But if you're 65 and you're delaying your CPP to 70, you're going to be questioning that decision every year, right? Even if the math is sound, even if you have a financial planner who's in your corner and saying, this is a good idea, this is what you should be doing, you're going to be questioning it every time. And every time you go to a barbecue with your friends, they're going to think you're just a little bit crazier than you already are. And if you're delaying both CPP and OAS, your friends will never invite you back. I'm joking, obviously, a little bit here, but that is a major commitment to the financial strategy. And again, even if I'm your financial planner or somebody else is your financial planner and we're in your corner cheering for you, you're going to question that a lot. And so is 5 years of questioning that worth $26,000 in today's dollars? That's for you to decide. Not for me, but that's what the kind of math is showing. Now, at this point, we've talked about spending habits a little bit. We've talked about CPP timing. We've talked about OAS timing. But one of the other places I always go to and I always double check is withdrawal order. Where are you taking your money first? Where are you taking your money last? And what's really the rationale behind that? And all the projections you've seen thus far have the TFSA leaned on really early because that's what the software thinks the average Canadian would do. I don't really like this. I'm a big fan of protecting the TFSA. I have a myriad of reasons why I think that that's the way to go, but ultimately it boils down to the TFSA is by far your largest strategic tool to manipulate taxation legally in retirement. So I want to protect it as long as possible. So here I have, again, everything the same. CPP and OAS are both delayed to 70, but now I have the TFSA last. And if I go down, it actually increases your estate by $12,000, but it decreases the value of your estate before taxes. So this, if lots of people stop here and say, oh, well, my assets will be less at the estate value, that's not a good idea. But it's way more tax efficient because you have TFSA remaining as opposed to RRSP, meaning that your estate actually does get more money. So I really like this idea. And again, it lends itself to flexibility for you. If your TFSA is much larger in your late 70s or early 80s and you need access to money, I would way rather need access to money and have TFSAs than not. So at this point, I've probably come close to maxing out the most out of this financial plan, the most income from different sources, the most estate value, things of that nature. Now it's time for the fun recommendation. This is where I get to jack up your spending and jack up your travel spending, your grandkids spoiling, your Harley Davidson tinkering in the garage, whatever it is that's important to you. This is where I get to find a little bit of space for that. And I want to stick with the go, slow go, no go strategy here. And what I've done is I've increased the spending from $66,000 to $75,000 a year. So about $9,000 a year for a travel budget for the first 10, 11 years in retirement. I made no other changes. The slow go and the no go stayed identical. Again, remember that $75,000 is today dollars. That's not future dollars. And if I go here to compare the actual scenarios, and I can zoom in on this a touch. If we go to this, yes, we've dropped away some of our goal coverage, right? Before I added that extra spending, we were at 120% goal coverage. That's some beautiful buffer. We're still at 10% goal coverage. That's still a win. But here's the important bit. Your lifetime expenses. Now, this is in nominal dollars. That means inflated dollars. But your lifetime expenses through the entire 25-year projection has increased by $112,000. That's $112,000 more travel in this scenario than you did in the other. I would love $112,000 of travel right about now. The estate, of course, takes a hit, right? We spent an extra $112,000 on ourselves. The estate takes a $250,000 hit. That makes sense. And to me, that's a pretty reasonable trade. And even still here in this scenario, the Jim and Pam are leaving $300,000 to their kids. And I think that's a pretty big win. So if it's time for me to go through your scenario like this and find as many wins as I possibly can so you can travel and live your best life in retirement, there'll be a link in the description below that'll come directly to me. But until next time, keep planning.